Okay, welcome back. Chapter 6 of the Adjustment textbook, and now we're going to be moving into part 2 of me capturing some of the highlights of that chapter. Again, this is a really full chapter. It's got a lot of information, and I do hope that you take the time to read and review it because it's got a lot to do with how we see the world. And these insights can really help us to build and to modify or change if we want to. So while outside factors still exist, we can have an influence in how those things happen and how they affect us. So as we move forward, one of the things that we're going to talk about here are motives and things that drive people, that get us up every day and help us with our perceptions and how we see things. And one of those is the self-assessment. Our self-assessment is our desire to get to know ourselves. It's self-reflective. Who am I? What am I capable of? If you've taken any of my other classes, you'll see I use a lot of self-assessment tools. I think it's really important that we have a good interpretation or a good view of ourselves. When somebody says, what do you want to eat? What is your favorite color? And you don't know those answers, that's something we really need to discover for ourselves. Who are we? What do we like? What do we stand for? What do we believe in? So many of you who've had classes with me before have probably gotten those messages from me prior, because they really are imperative to our ability to cope and to move into future success. The second one is self-verification. In this case, what we do is we seek information that aligns with our views of ourselves, and sometimes we tend to ignore counterfactual information. Not necessarily counterfactual, but counter information. So if we see ourselves as capable, we're going to find more people who also see us as capable, and we're going to ignore those negative people that are just downing us. If we don't see ourselves as capable, we're going to find people who will reinforce that about ourselves and go, gosh, could you believe that they were expecting me to do this? There's no way I could do that. And they're going to reinforce how we view about ourselves. So that means a big deal that we will seek those things out. So we want to seek out those positive people in our lives that will help us to move in the direction we want to go to, because there's always somebody willing to hold us back, and there's probably somebody willing to help us move forward. We just have to select wisely. Our number 3 is our self-improvement, our ability and our willingness to look at our deficits not as failures, but of areas that we can improve on. So if we can look at those things and say, I want to brush up on this, I want to get better at that, and constantly be seeking to improve ourselves, that will help us a great deal. People who see their deficits as failures hold themselves back. I work every day towards different goals that I set myself, whether they be physical goals for my health, whether they be, I've been working on reteaching myself Spanish. I haven't learned Spanish, I haven't used it for a very long time, and I just set that goal for myself, and I work on it every day. And then if I miss a few days, I'm not mad at myself. I just figure out a plan to get back on it, or decide, is that still a goal I want to maintain? If it's to learn new things, or to watch the news, or expose ourselves to this, or take whatever those goals are, our willingness and our desire to improve ourselves is what's imperative here. Fourth is the self-enhancement, which is the tendency to maintain positive feelings about ourselves. So when we come across those situations that are not so successful, when we run across those barriers in the road, are we willing to move past those barriers and say, that's what they were? This was a barrier blocking me, or does it stop me? And that's a big difference. So some of us see a situation and go, well, I'm going to have to find a way around that. Other ones see a situation, and that's where the road ends. Self-serving bias is a bias that comes up. There's a few biases we're going to talk about now. They're good to know, and they're good to understand. We use them to preserve ourselves. We use them to feel better about ourselves, but we want to be aware of them in case we overuse them. We all use them, but overuse of them can be detrimental. In the self-serving bias, what we tend to do is, if something great happened, we are responsible for it. So because I worked hard, because I'm a great person, because of my efforts, this thing happened. However, if bad things happen, it tends to be, it was somebody else's fault, something bad happened, and that's what caused it. So a student who has a self-serving bias, if they did great on an exam, it's because I worked really, really hard, and if they did poorly, the instructor made the test too hard. They may not have studied any more differently, but the instructor, it was their fault, as opposed to maybe the material was more familiar to me, or I had a good day, or I was well rested. So we want to be aware of that. Are we giving ourselves credit that we don't deserve, or are we being realistic? And are we blaming others when maybe I could take some responsibility in that? So that's important. Something else that happens is sometimes what we will do is, your book talks about basking in reflective glory. Basically what they're saying there is that we will try to improve our image by talking about things that were successful that we were related to. So we want to be seen in positive light. So, yes, I was part of this club or this committee or this team, or I did this or I did that. So we make sure that we really highlight those important things that we were tied to so that people see us favorably. And we may cut out or not mention the things that we were involved in that were not so successful. So I may have had this great thing, and yeah, I was definitely part of that. I was the lead on that team, but this thing that didn't work out so well, I'm not even going to mention that because it's not really worth noting. So we want to be seen in the way we want to be seen. Self-handicap comes up here. I see self-handicapping from students quite a bit. Again, it's a way to preserve our self-esteem and to feel good about ourselves. What we see here is we may have worked really hard or worked the same amount of effort that we put into our studies, but there's a chapter that's really hard. These concepts were hard to get, or anything was going on. And so what we do is we take that test and we know we don't feel as confident going in, and we don't want to accept that failure. So immediately what you see, I'll get students will email me, I did my very best, but I just wanted you to know I've been up for 24 hours because this thing happened. I did my very best, but I just wanted you to know this happened, that happened, or whatever happened. Now, they may have been up 24 hours prior to, but they never told me about it because they felt confident in the material. So what happens is when we don't feel really confident, I'll get the email, that says, I really, really tried. And I think this is because I have a relationship with most of my students. I really, really tried. I don't want you to see me poorly if I didn't do great on this exam. So I just want you to know I'm getting a cold. And I'm not feeling very well, so I'm not sure I did so great. And then if they do great, they're going to say, oh, my study paid off. If they don't do great, it was the cold. It wasn't the fact. And at the end of the day, some material's harder and some material's easier. That's really the reality. You're going to have classes that you really enjoyed, sunk your teeth into, some that just came really easily, and some that didn't. Me too. There were classes that were really, really hard for me, and some that were really, really relatively easy. They just made sense, and it was something I could really bite my teeth into. So that's the self-handicapping. We're going to set up an excuse before it even happens, just in case I fail, so I can still look good and feel good about myself, and others can still see me in a positive light. Self-efficacy, you heard me talk about that term earlier. It's the belief in our ability to perform behaviors that lead to a positive outcome. So self-efficacy, I remember, it was many years ago now, somebody offering me a class, and I was working, and then an instructor bailed out of a class last minute. And they were like, can you take this class? Well, I'd never taught the class before, but I was really familiar with the material. I felt very confident in my abilities. And so I was able to immediately say, yes, I can do that. So even though I hadn't reviewed it yet, I felt very confident in my abilities to understand that material, having had worked in that field, in that particular field, in that area before, and I was able to step up and go, yep, I can do that, I can handle that. So self-efficacy really is our belief in our ability to do something. I feel confident I can handle that task that you're giving me. And that helps us to move forward a great deal. High self-efficacy is related to higher academic performance, better career choices, job performance, and coping. And why? Because when a challenge is put before us, we don't doubt ourselves. We look at that and go, wow, that's an exciting opportunity. I could totally do that. I can see myself doing that. I can envision that. I know I can do that. So that is something that really drives us and helps us to move forward. So it's our belief that we can perform well, that we can be successful. How do we improve it? It's a really important thing. Now, unlike the self-concept, how we see ourselves, it's what we see ourselves capable of. How do we strengthen that? Because it helps to develop our future self. One is we master successes. So having success in the past makes us feel confident we would have success in the future. Two is vicarious experiences, watching others have success that we see as peers. So if they can do it, I can totally do that. If they're able to do it, I'm capable of doing that. Another one is the the encouragement and the support of others. Having people behind us that believe in us makes a big deal with regards to our self-efficacy. And finally is the interpretation of emotional arousal. What that really means is if I get nervous, I'm okay with that. That I don't take nervous as a sign of failure. I take nervous as a sign of excitement, and how I look at that this is an exciting adventure, not one that's going to hold me back, because it's normal to be nervous or anxious. On the back end, the complete opposite, or the opposite of self-efficacy, is what we call self-defeating behavior. And this is a fear of success. So when that challenge comes up, hey, you've done a great job, you've been here for a bunch of years, I think that you do understand our company and our commitments and who we are. Would you be interested in a managerial position? Would you be interested in a promotion? And instantly, no. They don't see themselves as a manager. They don't see themselves as capable. Even though those around them may see that, they don't see themselves capable of that. And this is really important to understand. And sadly, I see this in students sometimes. Not often, but probably 5 or 6 times a year, I will see students repeatedly that are a class or 2 away from their degree. And then they quit. They stop. They hold themselves back. I can't finish it. There's all these things in my way that I can't stop it. And while they say I've got family stress and I've got financial stress and they had it before. Those stressors aren't new, and they've dealt with them before. And instead of getting so close and doing whatever it takes for that final stretch, they get to that final stretch and they're like, whoa, if I get my degree, I'm going to be degreed. People are going to expect me to act that way. I'm going to need to use that degree. I'm going to need to advance myself. I'm going to need to prove that I'm worthy of that. And I don't see myself that way. So it holds people back a great deal. They won't take the promotions. They won't take the future opportunities. They won't advance. They're going to stay in a different position. It's not necessarily a horrible thing. Everybody's built a little differently. But it really holds back those that are capable of more, simply because of damage that was done to them that makes them not see how capable and how much they could offer, how much they could do. If given they are given the opportunity, they're holding themselves back rather than somebody else. A couple final terms is our public self or impression management. Basically what this is the proverbial fake it till you make it. We want people to see us in a certain light. So we're going to ensure that we dress a certain way, we act a certain way, we speak a certain way, and we deliver ourselves in a certain way because we want to be seen that way. And we should be aware of it. I notice as we progress and we become more technology-based and less people-based, sometimes we forget that, and we're not being as aware of ourselves and how the impression that we're giving other people. So we always want to be aware of the impression that we're sending others. And finally, integration is a term it talks about. And what happens in integration is when we're trying to move up, we're trying to advance ourselves, and we're trying to find a foot in the door, a way to get into a situation. We might offer compliments, we say things very positive about people, we might do them favors, we might find a way to insert ourselves on a team or something that they're involved in so that we can move closer to that person and closer to that goal. It's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it's often a good thing. As we see ourselves in a different light, we're going to find a way to start behaving that way so we can get those opportunities and that exposure. I get that a lot with interns and things that start with us that will volunteer for projects because they want to be seen as capable and they want to have a job. And sometimes that's what happens. I'm able to see their work and their performance, and that works out well too. Self-promotion is making sure everybody knows the great things that we've done. Exemplification is to try to be the example of things so people can use us as a model. Intimidation is setting back basically a don't mess with me, I'm the leader of the pack image. And finally, if we are trying to move up and we're not getting noticed, then we may start begging as a last resort for opportunities. Last but not least, your book discusses ways that we can build our self-esteem. Again, our self-esteem, our self-concept, and our self-efficacy are huge to how we view the world and what we do. How do we better our self-esteem, especially if we're grown and we're not a young child anymore, so we're responsible for ourselves? One is to recognize that we can build our self-image, and so we can choose to get rid of the negative influences in our lives, get rid of the negative feedback, get rid of the voices in our head that say negative things, and get rid of the people that are giving us negative messages. 2 is to learn more about ourselves and self-assessment, or just attend my classes. My classes are full of it. Assessments, self-assessments is what they're full of. Don't let others set your goals for you. You decide what you want to be and how you're going to get there. Don't let others control you. Another one is to recognize unrealistic goals. You saw me refer in an earlier video about I'm never going to be a professional football player. That's just not realistic. So I'm always going to be hurting myself if that's my goal. To modify self-talk or change it, negative self-talk. So when those negative voices creep up on us and say, I failed last time, but this time I'm going to succeed. I get a lot of adult returning students that come back to college, and they may have had events in their lives or just not been ready for college and failed in the past. So they're coming back with this failure in front of them, and sometimes it feels too big to even see around. And one of the things I'll often say is that time was just practice. This is the real time. Now you're ready. Today, you are who you are. Back then you weren't quite ready, but now you're here. And so consider that practice. Consider that an opportunity to see what was in front of you, and now we're here to get serious. So get rid of those negative self-talk. Emphasize your strengths. We all have weaknesses, every single one of them. So why are we going to broadcast those? We know they're there, but use our strengths to help us move forward into the next stages of our life. And approach others with a positive outlook, both others and opportunities with a positive outlook. If we look for the good things, then good things are likely to happen to us. So hopefully you enjoyed that chapter. Hopefully you took some time to read it and review the detailed information, because there's a lot of stuff in there. I'll see you very soon for chapter 7.